Hello, Professor Renn. Can you hear
Hello.
me? Hello. Okay. Yeah, we are begin in 3 minutes.
Very well.
We'll start in 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to inform you that today's lecture will be proceeded online. So please do not connect the access to Zoom people in this auditorium because of the audio problems. So, okay, hello, everyone. Okay, let's begin. It is my privilege to welcome you to this special lecture for the third day of the 7th biannual EAEH conference. My name is Hana Song. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Anthropocene Studies. Today, we have the honor of hosting Professor Jürgen Renn. Professor Renn served as a founding director at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin since 1994. and also an honorary professor for history of science at both the Humboldt University in Berlin and the Free University of Berlin. He has made a significant contributions to our understanding of the history of physics. He recently has published several pivotal books about Albert Einstein, and he was currently awarded the 2023 Jürgen Renn currently became a founding director at the newly established Max Planck Institute of Geoanthropology in Jena, Germany in June 2022. He initiated the Anthropocene curriculum with Hakabe as part of the Anthropocene project. He currently authored a new book titled The Evolution of Knowledge, Rethinking Science for the Anthropocene in 2020, which has since appeared in a number of foreign language editions. So today, Professor Renn will be delivering a lecture titled Geoanthropology, Science for the Anthropocene. So without further ado, please join us in welcoming Professor Jürgen Renn.
Thank you very much for this very generous and kind introduction. As you said, I'm involved with the Max Planck Institute, and I would like to begin with a remark, how can that be? And I want to illustrate my remark by this beautiful picture by Paul Klee, the Angelus Novus, a very famous picture on which the philosopher and literary scientist Walter Benjamin wrote the following commentary: the angel of history. This storm irresistibly propels him, the angel, into the future to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is what we call progress. And I think this is an appropriate description of how the Anthropocene relates both to the future, related to progress, and to the past. And hence, in order to understand the Anthropocene, we need to look both into the far future, into the present, as well as into the distant past. What are the challenges? The Anthropocene is a consequence of complex and long co-evolutionary dynamics. We are shaping and engineering our planet at global scales. Humankind is no longer in a safe operating space. New global challenges emerge at rapid pace that contribute to systemic risks and system failures. And from all of this, one immediate conclusion is a new scientific understanding is needed to meet these challenges. And this new understanding can also be illustrated by this famous saying of Albert Einstein: we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And on the background of all these reflections, the Max Planck Society created the new Institute of Geoanthropology in Jena. What is geoanthropology? Geoanthropology is dedicated to investigating the dynamics of the human Earth system, which we consider a coupled system. So the idea is to bring together many different perspectives from many different disciplines in the understanding of this coupled system, and to bring this together in a new form of synthesis, which only can thrive through collaborations. And the hope is to train a new generation into this kind of synthetic thinking. So geoanthropology is all about collaboration among different disciplines and, of course, among different people. I start with a illustration. Here is on the upper left a picture of the new institute in Jena. It actually thrives in a special environment. Jena is a city in which environmental discussions have a long history, going back to Goethe, to Humboldt, to others. But also currently there are two other Max Planck Institutes, the Max Planck Institute for Biogeochemistry and the Max Planck Institute for Chemical Ecology, dealing with ecological issues. So there's a very nice environment to discuss this theme of the Anthropocene with colleagues from the Max Planck Society, but also from the Friedrich Schiller University in Jena, which has a strong interest in these subjects as well. Let me present you briefly how the Institute is constructed. It has 5 different departments, and I read you the names: structural changes of the technosphere, evolutionary Earth system science, co-evolution of land use and urbanism, co-evolution of biosphere and technosphere, and societal dynamics of the technosphere. Now you notice the different colors. 2 of these departments are already existing. They have a director. The first one is directed by me, structural changes of the technosphere. The second one, we have just appointed Ricarda Winkelmann, a physicist and Earth system scientist. She leads the Department of Evolutionary Earth System Science. And there is a third department that is in the making. The Institute has been transformed from a former institute dedicated to the science of history, to the science of human history. And this department is mainly an archaeology department, and it will in the future deal with the co-evolution of land use and urbanism. And the 2 other remaining departments are still to be shaped. So let me explain a little bit more in detail what we are doing. My department deals with, the deep human history, with niche construction, with globalization, with the emergence and transformation of that new human-made Earth sphere, the technosphere, with the great acceleration. And I come to some of these subjects in detail a little bit later. The Department on Evolutionary Earth System Science deals with all critical interactions between the different Earth spheres, with tipping elements, with domino effects and cascades. The future Department of Co-evolution of Land Use and Urbanism will deal with the change of land use from the emergence of agriculture to the impact of European colonialism and industrial land use, changing forms of urbanism, green cities. So looking again both into the deep past and into the deep future. The Department on the Co-evolution of Biosphere and Technosphere, we look at the changes of the biosphere in the Anthropocene, look at new ecologies, the crisis of biodiversity and extinction dynamics, and at global issues such as planetary health. And finally, but also very importantly, the dynamics on societal dynamics of the technosphere will deal with the social, regulatory, and economic dimensions of the Anthropocene. And the idea is, of course, that these departments will not work separately or even in competition with each other. They will develop integrative thinking. They will do co-evolutionary modeling and interpreting those models. They will focus on critical temporal dynamics, and they will create a joint research network, synthesis of work ongoing at other institutes, and focus on common projects, not on separate departments. That is really key to the success of such an institute. So now, after this very general introduction and some words on the institutional setup, I will go into some of the core themes that we are dealing with. One core theme is, of course, the much discussed question, when did the Anthropocene begin? As you know, this is a question that has many dimensions. It has the stratigraphic dimension that is currently being discussed by the Anthropocene Working Group, but it has also this perspective of the Earth system science. When did the dynamics catapulting humanity in the Anthropocene really start? I will not go into the details here. Maybe there's some time for that in the question period. But just, let me nevertheless give you kind of an overall perspective. So the major transition that we are looking at is one from the construction of the human niche within the biosphere to the creation by humans of a new Earth sphere. And this is indeed a major transition. I will say in a moment a little bit more about major transitions, but that is one of the problems that how this transition worked, how it unfolded in the course of human history that my department is dealing with. Now, one word on the technosphere. As I said, in many material and energetic dimensions, the human-created Earth sphere, the technosphere, is comparable in size to the other Earth spheres, but it does have some very specific properties. For instance, the typical timescales on which it changes, on which it operates, which is much shorter than that of the other Earth spheres. But that shortening of timescales is transmitted also meanwhile to the other Earth spheres, because these Earth spheres are, of course, part of a highly interacting system. And so the short time scales of the technosphere are affecting, for instance, as you all know, the time scale of the atmosphere. The rapid change of the climate is an indication of that. Now, how did we come there? Let me just try to give you a very brief overview of what we currently think, in human history in 4 slides, basically. So it started with a first phase that we might call anthropogenesis. It is basically the emergence of the human species with its multiple branches of hominids, the spread around the globe, not just of hominids, but also of the human niche. And of course, the first impacts on the biosphere, the extinction of competitor species, other hominids, and of large mammals. And of course, some beginning of what later became domestication. Now, the second phase one might call technogenesis. It is starting with Paleolithic tool cultures. It goes on with the Neolithization process, urbanization process, and this phase ends with the establishment of a global circulation sphere in which the exchange of humans, goods, and technologies has assumed a global dimension. And by the latest, this was the case with the so-called Columbian Exchange. Then we come to the phase in which we are currently living. You might call it capitalogenesis. I also know, of course, that the Anthropocene has sometimes been called a capitalocene. That is, in some sense, appropriate, at least if we look at the current phase. So we are dealing here with the emergence and global spread of expansive economic regimes, new information technologies. I mean, not just the internet, but it started, of course, with printing and book production, the use of fossil energies, and the ever stronger coupling of economic, political, and scientific developments. And this has led us to the great acceleration, much discussed also at your conference, and I will come back to that in a moment. So is that the end? No, it can hardly be the end, because we all know that this will or might lead to collapse. So we need to deal with these challenges, and that's what the future harbors for us. So I've speculated about a 4th phase, the photogenesis, in which we start to globally realize the Anthropocene challenges as a threat to human life and human civilization on Earth, in which we might face the faltering of established social, cultural, and political regimes. But we might also, want to look at how a positive future could look like, the establishment of a balanced biotechnosphere, or I've called it a photosphere with renewable energies, and where we live in a much greater harmony with the other Earth spheres, in particular with the biospheres, of which we are still part. So let me summarize again the overall perspective, because I have announced your synthesis is our program. So we are looking at major transition. One is from the niche construction to the technosphere. I've mentioned that. And the second one is from the technosphere to the photosphere. That's the major transition we have to deal with in the future. But if we look at what in the phases that I showed you are the overall tendencies, we will kind of measure the size of the challenge with which we are confronted. What we have seen in the preceding 3 phases is basically a globalization and a homogenization of human life forms. We have also seen the elimination of negative feedbacks, hence the accelerating dynamics that we are witnessing. And we have witnessed the externalization of ecological costs. So clearly, if these tendencies hold on for the future, we will not make it. We will have to deal with all three tendencies when we want to address a livable future. So what we try to do at the Institute in Jena is to understand the dynamics of these long-term developments. It clearly has to do something with population. It has something to do with the knowledge that we accumulate. Cultural evolution is a much faster learning process than biological evolution, and it has to do something with the different energy regimes in which we are operating. So clearly, as you can see, we have introduced a lot of positive feedbacks, and we have, and this is again not just one scaling regime. We are looking at permanent restructurings of the Earth systems and changing dynamic regimes. So the observations is we are dealing with a complex evolving system that is governed by regulatory structures. Such systems construct their niches. These niches feed back into the systems. But we also know from biology in particular that dynamically stable systems have the right balance between positive and negative feedback. So this is one, from this systemic perspective on regulatory system, we can learn that we have to reintroduce negative feedbacks. Now, this brings me to the larger Earth system, to the physical Earth system with whom we have to deal with and that we have to take into account. And we can learn a lot from what Earth scientists, what Earth scientists are currently exploring as far as the physical Earth system is concerned. They're looking at the highly nonlinear nature of this system. They're looking at tipping points. They're looking at domino effects among these tipping points, and they're looking at cascades of changes. And I'm mentioning this because they kind of illustrate the threat that we are dealing with, because if we are looking at the Paris Agreement at the 1.5 degree or 2 degree goal, then sometimes it seems that this is, something gradual, but it's actually not. The dangers are imminent. And in order to illustrate this, I show you this picture here of the interaction between the hotspots, the sensitive points that may interact. There is the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which interacts with the Amazon forest. There's the Amazon forest, which may interact with the cryosphere, the Arctic and the Antarctic. And this leads to risk of domino effects, and that increase significantly with global warming. In order to show you that in a somewhat more illustrative way, I have brought you this little illustration from my colleague Ricarda Winkelmann, and I'm just showing it to you how these hotspots are interrelated in the physical Earth system. So there is the Greenland ice sheet. Global warming increases the melting of glacier ice, which causes more fresh water to run into the North Atlantic. And this then affects the Atlantic water currents, which are disturbed to begin with in the north. But this may cause a weakening of the entire Atlantic Ocean circulation, and changes to ocean currents in turn can influence the rain over the Amazon. This could lead to less rain and the danger of fires, as we are witnessing all over the world, but also regionally heavier rain in some places. Extreme events, in one word. But then higher sea levels from melting can also increase ice discharge on Antarctica, resulting in even more sea level rise. And so you can see this illustrates how the interaction between these systems means that tipping point can be reached at less global warming than was previously thought. That is a result that Ricarda Winkelmann and her colleagues established. So now back to the human side, back to the human Earth system, and I have here some quotes that say we live in the Anthropocene, and humans are clearly one of the most important determinants of this. But current climate models tend to include humans, but only as an external factor so far. And what we clearly need is human environmental interactions to be factored in much more significantly, because they are part, and this is why I've shown you this, or why I've stressed this nonlinearity, they are part of the nonlinear action of this coupled human-Earth system. So this is the project that Jonathan Donges is pursuing at the PIC, and he does so in close collaboration also with what we are doing in Jena, co-evolutionary modeling. But we're doing also other things in Jena. We are looking at the deep past as well, and we are looking, for instance, at how agriculture evolved and how it globally spread. And we are trying to do this in a combination of traditional cultural history and modeling based on big data. So I'm just showing here some samples. If we have time in the discussion, we can look more deeply into this. We are looking not just into the spread of agriculture, but also in other exchange networks, because we really want to understand how the technosphere emerged. And hence we are working on a global digital atlas, bringing together technology developments all over the world in order to better understand how the technosphere came to be from a niche, a human niche, into a global Earth sphere. So here are just some illustrations from the work of Ricardo Fernandez, Martin Robates, Patrick Roberts, and others at the Institute. One topic, as I mentioned, that we will address more strongly in the future is the urbanism in the past and in the future. Why urbanism? Urbanism is one specific form of land use, but it will be a challenge for the future. How will future cities have to look like in order to be sustainable and in order to be compatible with a livable Anthropocene? And urbanism may have been in the past one among many trajectories of human evolution, but in the future, ever more humans will live in cities. So I think this is a really important theme to be studied. And urbanism is coupled, again, this coupling thing, this nonlinearity is, of course, a hallmark of the Anthropocene and of the human Earth system. So urbanism has evolutionary impact. There are, meanwhile, many species that have changed or even emerged in the context of urbanism. So the overall message that I want to bring here is that in order to understand the deep future, we need to understand also the deep past and learn, for instance, from histories of collapse, but also histories of resilience from past experiences. And this is exactly what researchers at the Institute like Patrick Roberts, Christopher Carlton are doing. They're studying how the technosphere evolved. Here, pictures from global exchange networks, but also how urbanism and land use evolved in different forms in the centuries that we are looking at. And here I have no time to go into much detail here, but I just want to show you that we are dealing with phenomena of urbanism all over the world, not just in Europe, but also in Asia. And this brings in also an empirical aspect, because it's not enough to collect data and to make models. There is also the need for ground truthing, because if you have new questions, you have to also do new empirical work. And that's actually what Patrick Roberts has been doing recently in the Philippines, where he has studied, the changing forms of urbanism from the pre-colonial to the colonial time, and what he's currently doing in Sri Lanka, for instance. Let me come back to the great acceleration, which I'm sure is a theme with which you all have dealt intensely. Now, we have started, these are iconic curves. The great acceleration term was coined in 2005. These curves, have become popular in the Anthropocene discourse. But we would argue at the Institute, they need to be looked at much more carefully. And this is what we have started to do. Of course, behind many of the phenomena of the great acceleration is population growth. So population growth is clearly a key factor. in greenhouse gas emissions, in CO2 emissions. But if you do a more careful analysis, you discover interesting phenomena that even make question the term of the Great Acceleration. For instance, you can do a breaking point analysis. Breaking point analysis means, I'm going back for a moment, sort of looking here at the scaling in a log-log diagram and trying to find out where really the dynamics change drastically. And I give you just one illustration that is currently puzzling us. There is such a breaking point in 1914, where the exponent of this development changed drastically. So had we continued, greenhouse emissions based on fossil fuel use, as we did before 1940 during the Industrial Revolution, today we would look at a 608-fold emission if we extrapolate it to an 8 billion population as we have it today. What is the origin for that? Is it the Great War? Is it the transition from coal to oil? Is it the electrification? So that's currently what we are exploring. And again, I have no time to go into much details, but I want to end my lecture by saying we are not just looking at the problems. Clearly, the problem is to understand this complex nonlinear system that has run out of control. And geoanthropology may have a role to play here because it draws all the things together. It's trying to do the synthesis. But what about the solutions? Now, here we are really, if we look again at the Great Acceleration, the simplified diagram, we have to think not just about deceleration, we have to think about a true regeneration dynamics. How are we achieving that? Human agency, individual and collective human agency is decisive for that. But we do have to understand whether the planet, on what trajectory the planet is in order to use the right leverage points. So the question is, which interactions between change processes, human experience, behavior and thinking drive successful transformation processes? I think we need to build bridges between knowledge and actions and between the local and the global. And it's very important in my conviction that actors must be enabled to refer to their own local experiences and to be able to relate them to global changes and achieve a sense of self-efficacy, even at a global level. So in a way, we're betting here again on the nonlinear character of the coupled human Earth system. So let me go really down to earth and remind you of some of the experiences that some of us also had together in the context of the cooperation with the Haus der Kulturen der Welt and the Anthropocene project that we launched together, the Anthropocene campuses, which were such a collective experience where we had the feeling of being able to bring together local and global experiences. And we're really happy that this spread almost all over the world, and we are certainly in Jena quite willing and quite prepared to continue this series, because it is also a way of ground truthing some of the more general experiences and investigations that we are pursuing. So in short, we need socio or social epistemic tipping points. And history is full of them. There's the Renaissance. There is the New Deal area project. They have their downsides. They were local phenomena, and they have also some bad consequences. But we still need to think of those experiences in order to learn from them. And we need, I believe, new interfaces. So some of the lessons that we can learn from them is we need new platforms. We need to exploit the power of the web as a form of human connectivity, but we need to exploit it for the challenges of the Anthropocene. We need new forms of social participation, of course. And we need new planning processes, because in order, for instance, to confront a global energy transformation as we need it, a defossilization on a global level, we need completely new infrastructures, and we have to start building them, and quickly so. So we need a mutual stimulation between social and cognitive processes. That is what I'm firmly convinced of. And we have tried to explore these interactions at the Institute from a theoretical point of view, but also from a social point of view. We are developing together with the Arizona State University the model of the decision theater, where we confront people with these complex models, and discuss with them policies. And then we introduce the policies into the model. So that's a mutual learning process that Gesine Steudler in particular at the Institute is currently pursuing. And so this is about the co-creation of knowledge. And, and this may teach us something about how collective action that has led us into the Anthropocene may help us as well to live in it. And, we have to amplify the space of possible interpretations. We have to foster democratic legitimacy of projects. And for all of that, we need new forms of communication between science and civil society. And I want to close by thanking, the group with which I have composed the slides that you have just seen, but with which I have also been strongly involved in the collaborative project, which I could only sketch here. So thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Jürgen Renn, your enlightening lecture. We are now proceed to Q&A session. If you raise your hand, then I'll bring you microphone. Okay.
Hello, Jürgen. This is Axel Timmermann from the IBS Center for Climate Physics. It's been a very interesting presentation, and you mentioned also the need to integrate humans into climate models. I totally agree with you, but part of this has been done, of course, in the integrated assessment models that focus on developing projections, scenarios, and so on. So how is the approach that you were mentioning different from integrated assessment models?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We are trying to more deeply understand causal relations. And we are trying, what we are doing, for instance, in the context of the decision theater, are agent-based models. And also what Jonathan Donges is developing are agent-based models in which we try to understand, as I said, some of the causal relations. And we are not just thinking in scenarios, but we also try to model long-term developments. As I have illustrated, some of these developments have kind of a deep root in the past, and we are trying to understand these past dependencies, these long-term evolutionary tendencies. So that's why we also talk about co-evolutionary modeling. And the specific approach, I didn't have the time to explain that we are working with is a concept called extended evolution, where we understand the interaction between networks, regulated networks, and the niches, and try to understand the feedbacks between niche construction and regulatory networks. So that's the basic model that we are employing here.
That will be implemented into coupled general circulation models.
Yeah, that is that we haven't done for sure, but that might be a perspective on which we are working. But I hope, of course, that my colleagues from the Earth system science will help us to understand how they will be coupled. For now, these models are more working on regional scales. Their application is not yet implemented on a global level, and the hope is, of course, to do that in the future.
Thanks so much, Jürgen.
Okay, any other questions?
Hi, Jürgen. This is Bamsun, and thank you very much for your presentation. I believe that it's very early in the morning, still very in the dark outside in Germany. I'm very impressed by the way you present kind of a cross-disciplinary collaborations through many themes. And I'm just wondering how you kind of encourage people to work together or exchange ideas, cross-utilization of new findings and stimulations. And is there any recipe for encourage people to do that? I mean, you are the director, and so you are in a position to administer and then steer the new institute to a very collaborative mode of thinking and the regions. Any ideas?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I'm really sorry that I cannot be with you in physical form. That is a theme that is much easier discussed in personal communication as across the Zoom window. It depends very much on the openness of people. And I think first of all, the theme of the Anthropocene helps very much bringing people together, because the Anthropocene is such a challenge for all of us. It's such a complex phenomenon that many disciplines are required. And if you are dealing with people, as I'm lucky to do in Jena, that are open-minded to bring their specific competence, archaeological competence, for instance, to bear on these phenomena. So when we started in Jena, the archaeologists were already there and working on human environmental interactions, for instance. But many of them have really started to see also the global dimension of these problems. And they were more than willing to now engage also with the earth scientists coming, with the physicists, with the mathematician, with the biologists coming, just because their own research experience already made it clear to them that there are these ramifications for which they need other competence. And, we have, and on the social side, we have town hall meetings, we have open discussions. We don't want to erect any departmental walls. And the main thing is really, and I know for young people it's a bit different. It's not just the most successful nature and science publication. These people do many of those as well. But the main thing is to a common understanding of the problems, and talking a lot, open communication, complete transparencies, and a little bit damping out the competitive element in science, I think is very helpful and very important.
Hello, Jürgen. Fernando here from the Anthropocene Commons. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about, because the Max Planck Institute for Geoanthropology is focused on many different types of modeling, and in that sense, striving for global knowledge or in a sense, planetary knowledge. But I'm very curious to understand how you have tackled with the problem of scale and scaling, in how you take into account geographical differences, time differences, or even in that sense, the different kind of data we are able to gather for different regions or different countries that have different levels of material possibility of gathering such data, and how all of these different problems of scale are being taken into account as these models are worked upon and developed.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I have to just issue a warning. We are just starting. So, many of these problems are problems that we are trying to tackle. But until, I think, a week or 2 weeks, I have been the only director at the Institute with no department, or the department is just building up. And I have now 2 collaborators that are working on these problems. And who has been there already are the archaeologists. And they are a group of people that is already heavily working with data, and mostly regional data. And you are absolutely right in sensing the difficulty of bringing very diverse kind of data together. One project, for instance, is on the Amazon, and Ricarda Winkelmann, who has just joined me now, is also working from an Earth system perspective on the Amazon. I've showed you these pictures about the Amazon as kind of one of these hotspots. And now we are trying to bring together what the archaeologists have collected in terms of data on, tropical environments, changing forms of urbanization, and even historical data on indigenous resistance against colonialization and its effects on, preserving the Amazon rainforest. And now, we are really trying to bring together these very different data sources. And, we are grappling with it. We are trying to do it right now, but I cannot yet generalize and give you a generic answer to this. But we do see exactly that problem, and hence, one institutional thing I can tell you is we have created a special, or we are in the process, I should say, of creating a special unit just dealing with bringing together data from different sources together. So we have a high performance computing department, and we have a department that is just aiming at, data preparation together, of course, with the experts that bring in these data, because we see the challenging character of that problem.
Any other questions?
Guten Morgen, Jürgen. So I'm so glad to see you here. I'm Indra from Humboldt University, Berlin. My question is quite simple. I'm interested to know what might be the outreach or public engagement program from this Max Planck Institute for Geoanthropology, because one thing that has been really exciting in the past was this engagement between HKW and Max Planck Institute für Wissenschaftsgeschichte. I'm curious with that, and last thing, I'm really excited to see to looking forward to the launching of the Max Planck Institute for Geoanthropology.
So thank you very much for this encouraging question, I might say. Yes, public engagement is quintessential for what we are doing. And you are absolutely right. We have learned a lot from this collaboration with the Haus der Kultur in der Welt. Now, Haus der Kultur in der Welt has changed its direction. It's no longer available as a partner. And we are looking for other partners. Fortunately, this, Anthropocene campus experience, and many of you have been part of that, has led to I would call it a self-organizing community on which we rely also in our future collaborations. And we are certainly planning to support and also to organize future campus events of that kind. Specifically, we are planning a campus event in Jena for 2025, together with the Weimar Classic Foundation, which is, similarly as the HKW, engaged in cultural affairs, cultural events. But also, and this is as quintessential, with our international partners in doing that. And we will find many new forms. The decision theater that I briefly mentioned is one form that we want to develop into an outreach instrument. And I think this Max Planck Institute, more than any other, will thrive only if the outreach is not an add-on, but is an essence of what we are doing. And one fortunate circumstance is we are having now a new president of the Max Planck Society who thinks likewise, to put it shortly, who thinks that, outreach is not just, PR for Max Planck, but it's an essential, bridge between science and society. So I'm very hopeful that this new constellation will also help us to develop this.
Okay, thank you again. We are now approaching to end, but we can take a question. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Brian Lander from Brown University, a historian of ancient China. And I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I was very glad to learn about all this. I just wanted to ask about, essentially, in your models, there's a lot of emphasis on technology, have the word techno in 3 out of your 5 sections, and sort of systems of thought and ideas. And it seems to me that I was surprised to see very little on sort of systems of political power and economic power, and essentially the small groups of people within human societies that tend to have enormous influence over how they work. And so I was wondering just whether that's part of your mission to think about those issues of power. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That is really a very important remark. I mean, first of all, at an institutional level, we still have, one free chip, which is the department on the social dimension of the Anthropocene, and there we will, deal with power relations, and that has to be central to this. The other thing is, of course, this may be a bit misleading, because we are using the term of the technosphere. But the technosphere, and there is, as many of you know, the term has been coined in its present form by Peter Huff. He's an Earth system scientist, and he thinks of the technosphere very much as a kind of self-organizing technological infrastructure kind of thing, including humans, but only as kind of small parts. I have had controversial discussion, friendly discussion with him, because I think, like you, that technology, even with its enormous dynamics, is far from self-organizing. It's humans that organize technology, and it's human power structures that shape it. So some of the techno in my talk comes from that term of the technosphere, because I think it's a good, some call it anthroposphere, but that's kind of, underestimating. That sounds more like a part of the biosphere, what humans have done in terms of niche construction. But this, I think, should not, and I hope will not, lead us to underestimate power and culture in their role of shaping both the past and the future.
Okay, then maybe the very last question, no? Okay, then we are now reaching the end of our session. So thank you, Jürgen, Renn, for your insightful lecture. So just let's end up with give a big applause to Jürgen, Renn.
Thank you very much for your attendance and for your attention and your questions.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, quick advertisement. After this lecture, we had a special exhibition in this auditorium, and as well as in the third floor, titled "Witness in the Anthropocene." You can experience the artist perspective on the Anthropocene. So, and enjoy your lunchtime. Thank you very much.